College football does kick off in earnest tomorrow. It's got number 2 Ohio State hosting Notre Dame, third-ranked Georgia hosting Oregon. Off the field, though, it's year 2 for the NCAA's still young name, image, and likeness policy. One many feel was a debacle in its first year. Jim Cavale is the founder of INFLCR, and you spell that minus the vowels. It's an NIL company serving more than 170 schools, more than 100,000 athletes. Jim, good to see you. How would you evaluate the success or failure of NIL in year 1?
Well, the way I really evaluate success is I look at what it's getting student athletes to do while they're still student athletes, while they still have the jersey. And it's a lot. Student athletes are learning how to really go outside of their shell, build a network and a brand that they can now monetize while they're still playing. And that's my favorite part about NIL. Obviously, there's a lot of problems that need to be solved. That's why we exist. But at the end of the day, student athletes are really starting to learn things that they're going to apply well after they're done playing, which is what I love about NIL.
What your company does is also what I like about NIL, but what it feels like is more of a pay-for-play, at least when it comes to major college football and basketball. Is that the way you see it?
Well, listen, I mean, there's traditional NIL that we've seen celebrities and pro athletes do for years, right? Endorsing brands, making appearances, signing autographs. But there's a non-traditional NIL that's arisen, and that NIL is where passionate fans and donors can now engage student athletes in opportunities, mainly geared around something like an appearance, where they get paid. And the fact that you can't really control what they're paid and how they're paid is what really makes people feel like it's pay for play, because there is a performance aspect to their NIL value. It's the big driver with these donors, or collectives as they're called, engaging them. And they're still not supposed to do that during the recruiting process. Recruiting inducements is the one rule the NCAA did set when it comes to NIL. And what will be interesting is, will the NCAA regulate that rule by coming down on some schools that maybe have had a recruiting inducement occur?
Yeah, I hope you're right. So how much do you think NIL has really elevated women's college sports? They seem to be living by the true spirit of NIL, and how do you think it evolves in year 2?
We had our NIL summit for INFLCR over in Atlanta earlier this summer in June. We had about 300 student athletes, and more than half were women student athletes. And they are doing so well. I mean, one example would be the average college football player across our 220 Division I schools, and is averaging about $3,000 per deal. The average women's gymnast is averaging $17,000 per deal. And that's just what we're seeing in our system. So there's a lot of women athletes who are doing a great job, especially on social media, where we saw more than 60% of our transactions occur, are really taking advantage of it. And, overall, women almost make up half of the transactions versus their counterparts. It's not as divided as some might have thought it would be between women and men in transactions. So I think it's a really good start for women.
All right, the company is INFLCR, minus the vowels. Jim Cavale, one of the power brokers of NIL and the NCAA. Good to see you, sir. Thank you. Come back and see us in a couple of months.
Thanks for having me.